Hello, everyone. Hi, it's Tracy at TierraCast. I'm coming to you on a Tuesday morning with our sort of weekly live jewelry demo. I've already kind of checked my various streaming places. We should be live in YouTube and on the TierraCast YouTube channel and also on the TierraCast Facebook page and in the event, I hope. You know, you set these things up and hope everything works properly. Hello, Sabrina. Thank you for joining me this morning. Something else I wanted to say, forgot what it was already, but maybe it will come back to me. So our demo today is we're getting out some seed beads. Now, I like to say with my job at TierraCast that I don't really have an area of special expertise. I play with so many jewelry techniques. I kind of try and do it all because we want to show, hello Robin, hi Kimberly, hi Andrea, hi Landa, because we want to show people how to use TierraCast components with as many techniques and jewelry styles as possible. So I kind of play with everything, and it's kind of wonderful. That part of it is really wonderful. And seed beads, I certainly struggled with when I started. Yeah, really struggled with them. But since then, I've really grown to love working with seed beads. And this design is a beaded rope. It is, get it up here a little bit closer for you guys. It is, I think, just a beautiful beaded rope style. I love the way it looks. There's a lot of variation you can use with your seed bead sizes. And in this case, this is the technique is called filled netting. So it's filled because I should actually just go ahead and change my camera view, guys, so we can work on the work surface and you can see a little better the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. So filled netting is a beaded rope it's a simple netting. If you've ever done a netting stitch, it's quite simple. It's just a matter of having a cross bead and filling in with little segments of seed beads and kind of netting all of those things together. And then filled netting is when you have some beads inside, and it really works up very quickly and is a very fun technique. It's oops, oh my goodness. I meant to enlarge my screen where I'm working, and I accidentally hit the X to close it out for a second. For a second, I almost lost you guys. So now when I started this design, we were working on our Wild West launch way back at the beginning of the year. And we were working on a new cord end, an 8mm cord end. So I very specifically chose beads that I wanted the ending to be able to fit into an 8mm cord end. The cord end didn't happen. We had too many, we pushed it out. We decided, okay, we can't do the cord end for Wild West. We'll push it out to Spring Roundup. And then still just couldn't quite make it work. Sometimes that happens in production. Something just won't cast properly. So I didn't want to abandon this design. So I said, okay, can I make it work with these 2-loop stitch-in magnetic clasps? And we were coming out with the new Hammertone. So that's what I did. It's a little bit of engineering, and I was thrilled. I was really thrilled with how it worked out and how it ended up looking. Now I'm going to throw a link in the I'm going to actually put a couple links in here. First of all, as you guys know, the link to the project is, Andrea's saying she loves this clasp, that she used it for a bracelet last week. Yay, Andrea, thank you. Hello, Tanya's in New Zealand, and Tina is in South Carolina and getting rain. Nice. Okay, I'm also going to put a link in to a blog post we did when we launched our finishing touches line. That was the first line where we introduced our stitch-in components. So they're quite a special little type of component. We made them so that they would work well with seed beads, and you can stitch them right into a design. And I posted a blog so that people could, learn how to use these. I'm going to adjust my lights a little bit here. So that blog, I just threw that link in there, and it is just informative. It kind of shows you what the stitch-in products are all about. So what I'm going to start with today, I think, is I'm going to need some beading thread. I'm going to stitch a few rows for you, and then I've set up one that's kind of partially stitched here. And we'll move on to that one and show you how to put the magnetic clasp on. But first, we're going to just start with showing you how to do a few rows. So I've got some, you guys, if you watch me at all, you know that I prefer the braided and bonded beading threads as opposed to like silk or nylon threads, because when I work with the other kinds of threads, I end up getting knots, and I split my threads. I just really have a hard time with them. So I kind of lean towards the braided and bonded. They just work better for me. What's wonderful about the other types of cords is that, or threads, is that there's so many colors available. You can really match your color to your project. But I'm sticking with my braided bonded for today. Also, we have all these different stitch-in magnetic clasps now. We have both 2 and 3 loop. This 2 and 3 loop. This project obviously is using the 2. I've got a couple different styles here. I pulled out both the Temple from our original Finishing Touches launch, where we first introduced those types of components, and then that Hammertone that we just introduced. So I'm going to choose one of those. Don't have to do it just yet. I can do it later. The project sheet that you can get on the website. And Jonalyn is commenting on my needles, and I'm a big hole needle fan. They're easier for me. If I have a problem, I can easily unthread my needle and not have to worry about threading a needle through the little holes of the traditional needles. So my project sheet gives you, of course, everything you need. For the particular length that I ended up with, I used 102 3mm gemstone beads. And for this project, of course, I used turquoise, which is why I named it Netted Turquoise. You don't have to use turquoise. You can use any 3 or even 4mm bead. Now, remember, when I was first starting this project, I was designing it to fit into an 8mm cord end, which didn't pan out, but I was very concerned about keeping my diameter compatible with that 8mm. And since I switched to stitching it, or to working with the stitch-in clasp, I could have been more flexible about the width of the diameter of my rope. So you don't need to use 3mm beads. You could choose a slightly larger one. I think check glass beads would look great in here, fire polish rounds, a variety of gemstones. You need some thread, of course, which I mentioned. You need size 11 round seed beads, and you need those in 2 colors. You need your main color, and then you also, well, and I'm saying needing, but in actuality, you don't need to have 2 different colors here. But having that crossover bead makes it much easier to keep track of where you are when you're stitching. So you could do it all monochrome and just stick with one color, but I like using that second seed bead color as the crossover bead. Made it easier. And that's really all you need for this project. You need the clasp, you need the filler beads, you need the seed beads, and you need your needle and your thread. I do have to give a shout out to Jill Wiseman. One of her tutorials is what I used when I was really trying to refresh my memory about this stitch. And there's a lot of great filled tubular netting videos on the website. I watch Jill's, and she's just, she's very clear. It's really, Jill's videos just tend to be really, really useful. So I tried to do a lot of little step outs, diagrams for you guys, so so that you can kind of have a visual aid to help you get through the process. And so it's got lots of good stuff on it. And the first thing we're going to do is get this out of the way. And then I set up my beads, of course, as often a seed bead project will have the different colors of beads will have be assigned a letter name. So on my project sheet, you'll find that the little 3 millimeter round beads or gemstone beads are A's, and these little silver crossover beads are B's, and the kind of terracotta beads are C's. Now in the original, I used a matte opaque bead, but in today's version, I'm using it's like a little translucent bead. It's quite pretty. So the first thing I want to do is I cut myself about 4 feet of my beading thread, and I've threaded my needle, and I'm going to pick up an A, a B, an A, a B, an A, and a B. And that is my first, what we're going to call the filler row. Whoops, and I lost a B. And what I'm going to do with that now is bring it down to, I want to leave about a 6-inch tail. I'm going to bring that down about to that far towards the end of the thread. And then I'm going to come back right through that row of beads and thread and pass my needle all the way through them. And what that's going to do is pull that into a little circle. And then it's working its way towards a circle. Here's my tail coming out here. So I'm going to bring my needle through the next couple of beads. I'm coming out, my needle is exiting a one of the B beads, and then I can kind of pull those tails apart, and I have my little circle, and that's my first filler row. And always, you guys, I try to keep an eye on comments, but if you have a question or something and I don't catch it while we're live, I will definitely go back and try and answer it later. All right, so that's my first filler row. That's how I'm starting the whole beaded row. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding the size 11 beads. I'm picking up 3 C's and a B and 3 more C's. And I'm going to start creating what we're going to call wings. And you'll see why I'm calling those wings. Where's my needle coming out? Here we are. You're going to see why I call those wings in a minute. So I'm coming out this B. I've picked up 3 C's, another B, and 3 more C's. And I'm going to jump over that gemstone bead, that A bead, and go through the next B. And it makes this little, that's what we call our wing. And then I'm going to do that twice more to go all the way around that little filler row. Try to keep the tail out of the way so it's not cluttering up the show, but it will just want to, I don't know, it just wants to get into the action. So now I've got 2 wings. Trying to make sure I'm picking up the right number of beads. And then the last wing. Three C's, 1 B, 3 C's. And again, jumping the gemstone bead and coming through the next bee bead. And I may, as I think I already said, I'm going to refer to that here and there as a crossover bead because that's where the netting crosses. All right, and I'm keeping my thread tension pretty tight. I want to pull those all nice and snug. And so you can see now what I mean by the wings. All right, so now I need to step up. My next step, this first little circle of beads was my filler row. A circle of the size 11 beads is my wing row. And now I need to step up to get ready for another filler row. So how I'm doing that is I'm passing my needle. My thread's coming out of this B. I'm going to go through these next 3 C's and the next B, and I'm stepping up to get ready for my next filler row. So there we are. Now to make the next filler row, I'm going to start adding more gemstone beads. So I'm coming out a B bead. I'm going to pick up an A bead and I'm going to hop all the way over to the top of the next wing and go through the B bead up at the top there. And you'll see what happens here. When I pull that snug, it pulls the little wings up and curls around. So let's do that again. Another A, and I'm jumping over to the B bead at the top of the next wing. And doing that again with the third one. Hopping over and coming through the B at the top of the next wing. And pulling that all tight. So now you can see it's a short little tube, but you can see how it's starting to turn into a rope. So from here on out, I just repeat all of that. I'm moving on to the next wing row. Whoops. Yeah, next wing row. I thought for a second that I skipped my step up, but that's not what I need to do in this row. So picking up 3 C's, 1 B, 3 C's, hopping over the gemstone, going through the next crossover bead, and starting to make my next little round of wings. So with netting, you could absolutely play with the number of beads that you use for the netting. There can be variation in how thick seed beads are, and that can all affect how kind of spread out your netting is. So you can play with the number of beads when you're creating your netting. It could be a more loose netting. It could be a more snug netting. Somebody's saying, have I tried it? Have you ever tried it on a straw? You mean like to bead on a straw? For beaded ropes, you mean, Jonalyn? I have sort of heard of that, have not used it, but in this case, we got your filler row. I don't know if that would work very well because a filler row really does tighten up. There's no room for a straw in there. And I've done a few beaded ropes, but I'm certainly not an expert in the different, you can do a beaded rope with so many stitches. I have some experience, but I'm certainly not an expert. So last wing, I'm hopping over my gemstone, threading through that next B. And you can see now how it's starting to come together. So I'm coming out that crossover bead down there, and now I need to step up to get ready to add my next filler row. So again, through the next 3 B's, or C's rather, and the B at the top of the wing. So once you get the hang of this, it can go pretty quickly. And it's just repetitive. It's not a challenging pattern. It can be actually quite meditative. Make sure your light's good and your glasses are good when you're working with seed beads. You know, sometimes I like to, hello, Emily from sunny Mobile, Alabama. So Jonalyn is mentioning that she's done Russian spiral on a straw. I could see that. I think I actually did a Russian spiral beaded rope once, but it's been a while back. I might be mixing up my stitches. And Tina, I agree with you. This pattern, I think, is doable for somebody who's just starting to dip their toes into seed beads. All right, so I'm starting my next wing row. 3 C's, a B, and 3 more C's, and then hopping over the gemstone and through the next crossover bead. And I think this really will be the last rows I'll need to demonstrate for you guys. And then I'll hop over to the step out and show you how to put the clasp on. Because you can see it's just, this is it. You just keep doing this until you have the length that you need. All right, another wing row, step up. And then another filler row. Oh, excuse me. All right, you can see how that's coming together. Pretty easy. You just keep going with the filler rows and the wing rows until you have the length that you need for your project. And I was noticing yesterday when I was working on the demo examples that these beads I used in the original one are ever so slightly larger. So my whole rope is a little bit larger than this one. And maybe even the seed beads are a little bit more, or a little rounder, because this one you can see is just a slightly smaller diameter. So there's lots of, just pointing that out because there's lots of, variation. That's kind of interesting because you can, depending on what you do, what you use, you could do this project, 3-4 different times and end up with slightly different results because of the variation in different beads. Excuse me. Having a little allergic something in here. Okay, so that's my how to do the stitch example. I'm going to set that aside and we're going to move on to this one, which I did yesterday. And I initially threaded my needle with, thank you, Tina. Thank you, Landa. With about 4 feet of thread. And that got me about, what does that look like? About 4 inches of rope before I started running out. So I'm going to actually pretend this is long enough, and I'm going to actually close off this thread. I'm going to weave this through and finish it off. And then when I add more thread, it will show you guys, one, how to add more thread so that you could continue your length. Or if you're ready, you've got your length and you're ready to add your clasp, it would show you how to stitch in to start adding your clasp. So you can see I only have a few inches of thread left. And I ended at the top of this filler row. And what I want to do now is just stitch through that filler row again. Now, if I was adding thread to just continue stitching, I might not go all the way through the filler row again. What I really am going to do next is just start weaving back down into the rope a little bit. So I'm going through the crossover bead and I'm coming down through the next little bit of some C beads, and then maybe through another gemstone bead. And I think I want to knot here. You do want to knot a couple times. So to do that, I'm just threading my needle under some of the thread. So I got a little loop here, and then I'm going to pass my needle through the loop, and it just forms a little overhand knot. I'm going to pull that tight, come through the next bead, and stitch. I'm going to repeat that whole process one more time. And that's just going to secure this tail. I'm going to knot one more time. So again, I'm threading the needle. I'm kind of picking a spot between two beads, threading my needle underneath, making a little loop there. Thread the needle through the loop. The trick here is to make sure that your knot stays where you intend it to go. I don't want to end up accidentally wrapping around another bead and ending up putting the knot on the other side, because then the thread would be sitting on the outside of that bead and that wouldn't look good. Whoops. Oh, look here. What is that? It looks like I missed a stitch when I was doing my demo yesterday. I went on the outside of a bead somehow. Well, we're not going to worry about it now. That happens for me anyway. When I'm working on stitching projects, almost always find a mistake or where I skipped a bead or something somewhere in the process. All right, so I've got my rope. We're pretending, remember, that this is the end. I've got my full length and I just finished off the end of the rope. And gonna cut myself another couple, since now if I was adding more thread to continue stitching, then I would cut another 4 feet. As it is, I'm cutting enough just to stitch on a clasp component. So I've cut myself 2 feet of thread. Love the big eye needles. And here's where I get to decide which clasp I'm going to put on, and I'm going to pick the temple. This is a temple 2-loop magnetic. So depending on, figure out how I'm going to say this. So your rope is round, right? But if you're holding one side of it up to you, you're either going to have a little crossover bead in the center, or you're going to have crossover beads, you're going to have a crossover bead in the center with the 2 gemstone beads on either side, or you're going to rotate it a little bit and you'll have 2 crossover beads, gemstone in the center. So I kind of wrote the instructions. You could start this in either place, but the instructions are slightly different for the situation. So I wrote the instructions so that I was starting with what do you call it? Crossover bead at the center. So that's what I'm gonna demo. So the first thing I wanna do is I'm gonna start stitching my thread in. I want to secure it just like I did when I was securing it at the end. I want to make sure it's securely attached to the beadwork. So I just stitched through a few beads and I'm going to tie a knot. So I can get under the thread. I grab the tail and grab this and pull them so that that knot's tight. And I'm going to stitch a little bit more. I'll do one more knot, and then my goal is to come out of one of those crossover beads up at the end of the rope. So I'm stitching my way towards the end. And I do want to knot one more time. So I think I'm going to stop right here. My needle's coming out here at this end of the little row of C's. I'll do that knotting process again. Make sure my knot's ending up where I really want it. And then, let's see. And I'm coming out one of those crossover beads up here at the top. And now this is where I can start adding on the clasp. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick up 3 of the C beads, and I'm going to bring my needle through the loop. Hold on, let me think. Which direction do I want to go? Yes, this is right. So I brought my needle through the outside of that loop, and I'm going to pick up 3 more. And then I'm going to come right back through that that crossover bead, and that just made a little loop to attach right there to the loop of the clasp. And then I'm going to stitch across that filler row through the one of the gemstone beads and the next crossover bead. And then I'm flipping the whole thing gets flipped over. Oops, and even the next 2. The whole thing gets flipped over, the rope and the clasp. And I stitch through the next 3 beads in the filler row. So one of the B's, an A and a B, and that brings me to the spot where I'm going to attach the second loop. So this one is a little different because I've got my 2 C beads coming on the outside edges. Remember how I was talking about B, A, B. If you're looking at one side, and if you flip it over, you're going to have a A, B, A. So right now I've got the 2 crossover beads flanking the gemstone. So I'm going to pick up 4 seed beads, and I'm going to come through the outside of the loop on this side. And then instead of coming back down and attaching there, I'm going to pick up 5 or so beads. I'm going to pick up enough to fill in the space in between the loops on the clasp. Should be 5 or so beads should do it. And come through that first loop from the inside. I hope this is all showing up well. And then I'm going to pick up another 4 of the C's. and come back down through the bee bead that's on this side of the gemstone. So you can see I just kind of made a big loop to attach the toggle, the magnetic, on this side of it. And then I'm going to stitch around. Actually, you know what? I skipped a step, but that's all right. It's in the instructions. So when I first was attaching this first loop, once I got it on there, I repeated the thread bath just for reinforcement. And so in actuality, I would do the same on this side as well. I made that loop of seed beads. I would just repeat the thread path just to reinforce it. Paying attention this time to make sure that I don't skip beads and end up with thread on the outside. And I end up back down here in the filler row, and I'm just going to stitch back around. I'm looking at all of this and thinking, you know what? I did it wrong. Totally. Let me look at this one. So what did I do? I did it upside down. So when the crossover bead is in the center, that's the side that I want to do the big loops. When the crossover beads are on the outside edges, that's where I want to do the little loops. So let's just flip it over. We'll pretend that didn't happen because I do want to demonstrate it a better way. So I'm back, I'm on the other side now. I'm ignoring that. I'm flipping this over. I could pull all that thread out and start again that way, but let's just flip it over and use this end. Okay, so this is the little tail that needs to be stitched in. So I'm just going to stitch and weave and knot a little bit to get rid of this tail. It's a short one. I didn't really give myself as much as I should have to work with, but that's okay. It'll be fine. That's the magic phrase. It'll all be fine. There's a knot. Stitch it back down a little bit. And squeeze another knot in there, even though my thread's getting quite short. And I can trim that off. Some people prefer a thread burner for that kind of thing. I'm flipping back and forth between the threads a little bit because yesterday I was working with the fire line and it was 6 pound, but it's just a slightly thinner thread than the wildfire. And when I'm demoing, the wildfire is a little bit heavier and it's a little bit easier to see. You do want to do your project with a weight. I wouldn't use a 2 pound because that would be a little bit thin and delicate. I certainly wouldn't use a 10 because you're working with seed beads, and when you're working in the ends and adding thread, you have to make multiple passes through the beads. So you don't want your thread too thick because you need to be able to make multiple passes, and if your beads fill up, that gets tricky. So 4 or 6, I think, is a good weight for this project. So what I've done is I've cut myself another piece of thread so that I can stitch on the clasp the way I should have the first time, demonstrate the way we need to do it. But working at the other end already does bring up a good point that I'll show you guys here as soon as I've got my thread secured. Okay. My bracelet keeps attaching itself to other magnets over here, so I'm going to set these out of the way. All right, so when you're attaching your clasp, so I've straightened when I was attaching, I stitched the one piece on, and then to get prepared to attach the second side, I laid this out to make sure it wasn't twisted. And that way, when I attach this side, I need to put that magnet clasp on the opposite way so that when I curve this bracelet around, they're going to face each other. So that's kind of an important thing. I mean, it would still work. You would just have to twist the bracelet to make it clasp, to make those magnets face each other. Leslie's here. Leslie is a seed bead expert. So when I'm doing seed bead work, I don't know, it makes me a little nervous to have the experts watching me. Anyway, you want to make sure that you attach those clasps so that they'll face each other without you having to twist your bracelet up to make it work. So I attached this one incorrectly on this side. I've added some thread so I can attach this one. I can go ahead and cut this because I've already secured that. I've got about 2 feet, maybe about 18 inches of thread. That should be enough to attach my clasp component. And so what I was saying before, so now this side of the clasp is back up. I want to lay out this bracelet so that it's not twisted at all. And then I know I'm going to attach this one so that it's magnet side up. And that way they'll face each other. Okay, does that make sense? I hope so. All right, so what that means in this case, and this will change depending on how many filler and wing rows, you can see that I'm ending with the crossover bead at the center instead of a gemstone bead at the center. So that determines which way I'm going to start stitching this two-loop clasp on. So I need to get up to the top and come out that crossover bead on this side. And because this is in the center, and this is where I made my error at the other end, because I don't want, since my crossover bead's in the center, I don't want to do 2 individual loops. I want to do 1 big loop that attaches to that crossover bead. So I've added 4 of my seed beads, and I'm threading to the outside. I don't need the little bee beads anymore, so I'm going to slide those out of the way. The only thing I'm working with now is these C beads. So I picked up 4, and I came through the outside of the first loop on the clasp, and now I'm going to pick up 5, and this may vary depending on how fat your seed beads are. I'm going to come through. My needle keeps sticking to the magnet. I'm going to come through the inside of the second loop, and those beads, 5 was too many because I want them to sit in between those loops, and that 5 is just was 1 too many, so I'm going to back out, take one of those off. It's always fun to, oops, what happened here? It's always fun to show you guys how to fix the things, you know. Little challenges and things that pop up. All right, so 4 fits right in between there nicely. Pick up another 4, and I'm coming back and looping through that same center crossover bead. And now you can see it's hooked on, it's attached with one loop of seed beads. And I am going to repeat my thread path so that it's reinforced. Oh, there is 5 in there. I must have accidentally put 6 on and not realized it. So repeating the thread path, coming out that same crossover bead. So that's good. That's one side on. And now I'm stitching through the next A bead and B bead in that filler row. And when I flip the whole thing over, then now we're on the side that's got BAB, you got the gemstone in the center, and here's where I'm going to do the individual loops for my little, to attach to the clasp. So I've picked up 3. There's a little metal plate under here that holds my, when I'm working with magnetic stuff, I have a little metal plate I tuck underneath. And it works very well when I need to keep things in their spot, but when right now I'm finding that my clasp keeps attaching to it. All right, so I'm coming out this one. I picked up 3 beads. I'm coming through the loop from the inside, picking up 3 more and coming through there again. And you can see how that little loop just stitched up and attached the bead rope to that loop on this side. And did I repeat the thread path? I don't think I did. I better do that. And you can see that this means that we end up going through some of these beads several times. So that's where you want to watch your thread thickness. Now I've gone through that A bead and the next crossover bead, and I'm going to attach to the other loop now with the same loop that we just did. I don't want my needle to go through that row of seed beads that's in between, so I'm having to wiggle to make sure I don't get stuck in there. So 3 through the loop, 3 more, and then back down here through the crossover bead. And then repeat that thread path. And again, with your seed beads, when you're making these loops, this is where you could adjust the number of beads to kind of make your loops the way you want them. If they're quite thin beads, you might need to use more. All right, so there we go. We have on this side where the crossover bead was at the center, we attached with 1 big loop. And on this side where the crossover beads are flanking the gemstone bead, we've attached with 2 small loops. I hope that all makes sense. You'll remember at the beginning, this beaded rope, my thread is getting thick inside these beads, so I need to use a pair of pliers to pull that through. What was I saying? Oh, this design was originally being made to work with a with a cord end. And when that didn't work, I had to say, okay, how can I make this work with the 2-loop magnetics? So it was very much a little engineering process. So I've got my clasp secured. I'm just going to stitch through that row of filler beads. The end filler row one more time. And that's kind of just for stability. And then what I'm going to do is kind of weave this thread down into the beaded rope a little bit and do a couple knots to finish it off. So I went down into the netting. I'm going to make my little overhand knot. One more knot here, maybe. Okay, and I could keep going a little bit. I could just, continue weaving as much as I felt like I needed to in order for this to be secure. But I think that that's good enough for demonstration purposes. Oh, Jonna Lynn is coming to Santa Rosa for a niece's wedding. How fun! Yes, this would totally be a portable project. And somebody is saying half of Team Leslie. Oh, Emily's saying to Leslie Pope, hello to half of Team Leslie. Leslie's co-worker is also Leslie, and it's Leslie Rowe and Leslie Poe. So hi to Leslie Rogalski too, even though she's not here. So that's it, you guys. That's the little engineering clasp solution that I created to use these 2-loop magnetics with the beaded rope. I was pretty happy with it. I was pleased that it came out, and a big part of engineering a project for me. I've got a little thread showing here. You can see that I could have pulled that a little tighter. Everything that I do has to be writable. I have to be able to turn this into instructions that are going to make sense to you guys and that are going to be easy to follow. So I was pretty thrilled with how I managed to do this. It might not be the most elegant solution in the world, but it works. And I was happy that it turned a beaded rope. It made it possible to use that magnetic clasp with a beaded rope. So I think what I'll probably do with this one, you guys, is I won't abandon it. I'll unstitch the first side that I stitched on wrong. I will unstitch it and take it off, and then I'll continue this and I'll finish it so it's a finished bracelet. Because after all this work, it'd be a shame to abandon it, huh? So that's it, you guys. Let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to point out while I was working on this project? I think if I do it again, I definitely would like to try some fire polish check glass beads. I think that they could be really, really fun. And, you know, as far as palettes go, goodness, you could do anything. It could be, you know, I was definitely going with a Southwest. We were still very much in Southwest palette and style and mood for when we did the, this was a spring roundup design, right? So we were still very much in that Western kind of Southwest palette, and it would be fun to see this in some other colors. So maybe one day I'll do another one in another palette. So that's what I got for you guys today. Thank you for bearing with me. You know, it would be nice if demonstrations all went completely perfectly, but I actually really like it when things happen that I have to show, okay, this is how I can fix this, or this is how, you know, something gets messed up and this is how I can address it. I actually like the opportunities to demonstrate how to fix something. So, and how to be flexible. You know, if a design just isn't quite going the way you want it to, solutions. Engineering, it's all part of the jewelry design fun, right? So you guys, thank you for joining me, and I'm hoping I'll get something put together so I can see you again next week, and be well and have a great week and make beautiful things. And then, as always, if you ever do a variation or anything, if you use TierraCast in something and you think you want to share it with us, you can always tag us in a post, or you can actually share something right to the TierraCast Facebook page. So we always look forward to seeing your designs. So thank you, you guys, and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye.